Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good to see you again. I was reading something recently in the Financial Times, Desmond Lackman of the American Enterprise Institute, and he talked about the appreciation of the dollar. We've got a strong dollar, coupled with the substantial decline in international oil prices. And he said, this is a quote, those factors could very well reduce U.S. inflation to about zero by the end of 2015. He went on to write that it would seem reckless, this is his opinion, for the Federal Reserve to disregard such a prospect, especially at a time that recent political events in Greece and elsewhere are reminding us that the euro crisis is far from over. Can you speak to the concerns about the possibility that inflation could dip well below your 2% target over the next year?
Well, inflation is running below our 2% target even now. Total inflation over the last 12 months was 0.7%. And we think that inflation is going to move lower before it moves higher for exactly the reasons you cited. Import prices have been falling in part because of the dollar, and oil prices, declining oil prices, have had a very major influence. Now, the committee has indicated that it expects that in its most recent statements. Now, we do think that the effects of these factors will be transitory, and especially with an improving labor market, that we expect inflation over the medium term, the next 2 or 3 years, to move up to our 2% target. We've said we're monitoring these inflation developments very carefully, and it is one of the key factors that will be driving our decisions about appropriate monetary policy. But we do think that these factors are transitory, and if we gain confidence that that's the case on the basis of incoming data and continue to see the labor market improve, we would consider still raising rates. But we're very focused on the developments you cite.
Transitory is the key term there, though. And you think medium term, 2 to 3 years? Is that?
Well, every 3 months, participants in the FOMC submit their own individual projections for the economy. And in the December projections, which are included in your monetary policy report, participants indicated that they thought that inflation would be running in the 1.7 to 2 range at the end of 2016.
Thank you. You've
been
very thorough. I appreciate that. The next question I have is, under Dodd-Frank, this is something I supported, so I'm to blame here. We were concerned about proprietary trading, so we put a provision where banks and covered funds would have to disassociate, and we actually required that they change their names so that there would be no confusion by the consumer that banks and funds are affiliated. And so we're requiring a lot of these funds to change their names, which is visiting a significant cost on some of these funds. There's a reputational cost for the funds that have done well, and now they have to change their names. Is there any less costly way, less damaging way to accomplish our goal, which was to bifurcate these two entities?
I need to look into that a little bit more carefully.
Okay.
We've tried to use the ability we have to diminish some of the burden associated with disinvestments in these funds, but let me get back to you on
I can certainly understand where if you have a bank and then the fund is the same name with, something added, that the confusion would be palpable. But in some cases, you have a bank and the fund is named, I won't use any examples, but there's no confusion between the bank and the fund, and yet they're still, because they were previously owned by the bank, they're being required to change their name. And there's just got to be a better way about this, I think. And
Let me look into that, and I promise to get back to you on
I appreciate
that.
that. My time has expired. Thank you very much.